Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Onion Soup, the show where we demystify metaphysics and spirituality in order to find out more about reality. Today, we have a wonderful guest, Mr. Chris Earnshaw, who is a 33rd degree Mason and has found some really interesting hidden secrets about Freemasonry and its ties to Taoism. How are you doing today, Mr. Chris?
Very well, thank you.
Awesome. So I really want to first start with what is Freemasonry and Taoism before we really dive deep into it.
Okay. So, um, I think Freemasonry, firstly, it has over a 300-year history. So, this is something that was started in the 18th century, to be exact, 1717. So, it has a long history, but over the time, I think it's actually changed to so nowadays it's seen as being a fraternity and a major charity.
Hmm.
But it
In-
hasn't always been that.
Interesting. So, for my understanding, and a lot of people's understanding, Freemasonry is like a secret society, not so secret society, like a brotherhood of secrets and esoteric knowledge. Is that correct?
Yes, the label secret society is something we've been trying to get away from. We're really a society with secrets.
Oh.
So the way I put it is, for example, you have a bank account. How much money in that you have in that bank is private to you. It's your secret. Yes, and same for us. We have certain teachings and rituals. To initiate brethren, people into the brotherhood,
Mhm.
and those are our secrets.
Awesome. So, what is Taoism?
So Taoism is a philosophy, um, rather same as Freemasonry. Freemasonry is not a religion; it's a philosophy of life, and Taoism is the same. It's a way of living. Um, It's polytheistic, which means that you can be Taoist and Christian at the same time, or you could be Taoist and Buddhist. They think that they understand the philosophy of Taoism to exist before all religions were
Mhm.
created.
So, just for clarity, we're saying that Freemasonry started around the 1800s,
Yep.
and Taoism would be thousands of years old,
Yes, it's at least 2,000 years old.
right?
Sorry,
So,
at least 3,000 years old. Sorry.
exactly. So, when we look at Taoism,
Hmm.
what are the similarities between Taoism and Freemasonry? Because I had no idea that they were connected.
Nobody does, and that's why I wrote my books. Um, so, if I can step back a little bit, I studied classical Chinese literature at university, the University of London, School of Oriental and African Studies, and so I was particularly interested in the not in the works of Mencius. He's a Chinese philosopher, and Mencius is a disciple of or pupil of Confucius. However, they never met because there's a 150-year gap between the two of them.
Mhm.
Um, Mencius teaches the same things as Confucius, but in a way that's easier to understand.
Mhm.
Um, so I was invited in 2016 to visit Taiwan. Must point out I live in Tokyo in Japan, and Taiwan is only a 1 hour flight or 1.5 hour flight from Tokyo to Taipei. And so I took up the invitation, and it ended in me being initiated into a Taoist temple.
Mhm.
Um, it was called Lingying Temple, under the tradition of the Yi Guang Dao. One of the various groups of Taoism.
Mhm.
And when I went through the initiation, which was a very open and simple thing, I immediately recognized it's the same as the first degree ritual in Freemasonry. I've been a Freemason for nearly 40 years, so I was very familiar. and it was mind blowing. And so when I went back to Tokyo, I spent probably 4 years researching how this could be. But obviously, Taoism is much older than Freemasonry. But which came first? Did the Freemasons copy the Chinese, or exactly what was going on? And so I did some research into it, and I found a lot of similarities. Would you like me to explain?
Yes, actually, I was. My first question is: you mentioned the first degree of masonry. Are you referring to the 3 degrees?
Yes.
So, could you first explain what the 3 degrees are before we go into further into the
Yeah.
similarities?
So, to be a fully fledged Freemason, you have to go through 3 degrees, and the first one is an initiation. You become an entered apprentice. After that, there's a kind of verbal examination. Once you pass that, and that examination is only to see if you understood what happened during the initiation. Then the second degree is the degree of fellowcraft. Um, it's just one step deeper. Um, and then the third degree is the raising to be made a master mason. Each degree has a different story in it. It's rather like theatre. Um,
Mhm.
Ancient theatre, particularly in the 1700s in England, was theatre in the round, which meant you don't sit facing a stage, you sit in a circle around the stage. So it's a circular stage. So it's what we call a Shakespearean um, uh, Shakespearean stage. And even now in London, we have a theatre called the Globe that has been recreated like that. So Freemasonry is the same. You have um, like a theatrical performance happening, and everybody's sitting around in a circle, and they're either involved in it or they help in some way.
Interesting. Is it kind of like ritualistic rites or something like that?
Yes, it is. It's a way of teaching a person what Freemasonry believes are um, moral truths.
Mm,
And so we feel that if you gave somebody a book and said, well, read it or learn it, it isn't, the impact is not as strong as having to act it out
mhm,
in a theater, particularly when you don't know what the words are.
mhm.
Because you're just participating. Everybody else in the Freemasons ritual, they all have a part. Sorry, they all have a part, and they know their words. Only the candidate doesn't understand what's happening, so the impact is much stronger.
Interesting. So, what does that have to do with the Taoism? And you said that it was primarily the first degree that you felt
Yes,
Taoism was most related to. So, in what
correct.
ways?
Yes. So in Freemasonry, we believe, firstly, the 1700s was halfway through what we call the Enlightenment. It's a period of history in England where uh, not just historians, but educated people were reevaluating many truths that we thought to be God given. For example, in university, they had been studying Aristotelian type subjects, which meant that there was no question and answer. There was no investigation or everything. We had to take what Aristotle decided was the truth, and they were still studying that. This was challenged. Also, the position of the church and the church's beliefs, and particularly, for example, spiritual things, were being challenged during the Enlightenment.
Mhm,
So, Freemasonry, the interesting point here is that we try to enlighten a brother.
mhm,
Well, you can do it through education, but there's a part of the first degree where the master of the lodge, who organizes everything, he brings light from the east of the Masonic temple to the candidate.
Hmm.
It's a symbolic thing. We don't actually bring physical light, but he comes and he says, "I'm bringing you light from the east," etc. And then he gives the words and explains everything. Well, in a Taoist temple, it's the same. There
Hmm.
is a they have three officers in the lodge, which is the same as a um, Masonic lodge. We have three senior officers, and the in the Taoist temple, the senior person, his name is the light transmitting master.
Hmm.
That's his job. He brings light from the east. It isn't exactly the east, but it's a similar concept, and he brings it to the candidate. Um,
Does the represent like knowledge? Is there anything physical going on here?
Yes and no. So you won't see anything, but it's all to do with intention, the
Mhm.
intention of the candidate to accept the teachings, and also the intention of the officers to communicate the teachings, the ritual, and also to transfer the light. Um, there have been in the past some very spiritually aware people who have joined Freemasonry, and they say that they can actually physically see light entering the candidate,
Mhm.
and so that is it's a kind of awakening the soul. That's
Mhm.
what. So in Taoism, that's what it's about: is to wake you up, because the soul's asleep
Mhm.
in their way of thinking, and they want to say there is more to life. There is a spiritual life. Wake up, and we will show you. And Freemasonry is very similar.
So in both practices, it seems that there's a form of almost energy transference, such as like in Reiki or something like that, where you atone a person's spirit or attune a person's spirit to the knowledge or energy at hand that's held by the master.
Yes, we would think that the master is a more spiritual person and he is more qualified than the candidate. So, yes, there is a transference from one to the other.
Interesting. So going back to the relatedness between Tao and
Yes,
Freemasonry, so I'm sure after you first saw the relations with the first degree,
yes.
did you dig deeper into it? Are there more things that are related?
Oh, yes. So I did. I spent 4 years and I found 28 similarities between Freemasonry and Taoism. There are just so many of them. Uh, there was, I think, in the ritual, there were 17 correspondences,
Mm,
which were exactly the same. And then if you look at the layout of the Taoist, the Freemasons Lodge and the Taoist Temple, there were another 10 or 12.
mm,
To give you an example, a Freemasons Lodge has to have three senior officers. So does a Taoist temple. Well, that's a coincidence. Um, the uh, the senior people in the Taoist temple, they represent the sun, the moon, and the universe.
mhm,
Well, in a Freemasons lodge, there are what we call the three lesser lights, which are the sun, the moon, and the master of the lodge.
mm,
Again, very strong similarity. The Taoists also have a secret sign, a secret word, and a way of transmitting it. They call these the three treasures.
mm.
And in Freemasonry, we have the same. We have secret signs and ways of transmitting, and also secret words, passwords.
I'm noticing the theme of three there. Do you think that has
Yes.
anything to do with the Trinity at all?
No, because the Trinity is a Catholic concept, um, and this predates Catholicism
For sure.
by thousands of years.
Let me slightly rephrase my question.
Yep.
So, like, not necessarily the Trinity as far as the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, but
Yep.
how there seems to be in nature the positive, negative, and the neutral. So, in order for there to be balance, there has to be three. There has to be a neutral force and an opposing force on both sides.
Maybe. If you look at quantum mechanics, you'll find the story is a little bit different.
Oh yes, for sure. Once you start getting into like the
Yeah,
subatomic field and everything gets weird. I mean, even when you talk about like quantum vacuum theory, that gets a little crazy.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So, when we say you need three forces and there's a third which balances, yeah, that's just one way of thinking. But in Chinese way of thinking, there's a duality, and it's explained by yin and yang,
Mhm.
and everything has to be not only in balance but always in motion as well. So there's death and rebirth and growth, etc. But it has to be in balance.
Interesting. So before we keep going, we're going to take a really quick commercial break.
Sure, no problem.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. So, before we left, we were talking briefly about kind of like duality, but more so the reference in three and how three kept showing up. Does that have anything to do with the final, to my knowledge, the final level of masonry being a third degree?
Mm, well, 33rd, of course, is the age that Christ died. And so that has been used in Christian societies for thousands of different usages. For example, the steps to the Capitol building in Washington, D.C., there are 33 steps. It's just something that catches the public's imagination. In Freemasonry, there's no 34th degree, but the 33rd is all subdivided into other ranks as well. I don't think it's the number that's important. It's the amount of understanding that the Mason have. So many Masons nowadays are focused on the fraternity. Um, Meeting each other, having barbecues, entertaining,
Mm,
supporting each other. But in the old days, that wasn't seen to be important. They were studying, seeing if there was, for example, Gottfried Leibniz, German philosopher. He was looking to see if it was possible to create a universal church. Um, he thought that because Confucianism is a meritocracy, he wanted to see if Christianity and Confucianism could be combined to create this universal church. And it wasn't just Leibniz, the Royal Society in England were also looking to do the same thing.
mm, interesting. So, when you talk about the Taoism and Confucianism as well as Freemasonry, is there any documentation linking the two, or is this all through the research that you've done?
Well, yes. So there's a lot of interesting things. For example, um, the first three Grand Masters, when they rewrote ancient stonemasons rituals. Stonemasons were kind of dying out in those days. They had an organization, but there was no over control of it. People were just meeting in in what we call pubs, public houses, and they would exchange information, but it wasn't an organized fraternity until the first three Grand Masters came,
Mm,
and they rewrote the rituals. So in 1717, there were 2 degrees, and in 1725, they added a third degree. The third degree has all the Chinese teachings on how to become a spiritual being without dying. That was the point which was important to them because it, Christianity doesn't really talk much about immortality,
Mhm.
but Freemasonry does, particularly the third degree. I think it's referred to something like 5 or 6 times. The word immortality is used in the ritual. And this is, I think, what the Freemasons were looking to do. The second point is that from about 1680, in 1687, a Chinese mandarin visited London.
Mm,
A mandarin is a senior official in a Chinese government. And in fact, in modern in England nowadays, we still refer to as senior people in the government as mandarins.
mm,
But he came to England. Nobody of his stature had ever visited. We'd had coolies on ships, but we'd never had a Mandarin, and it caused quite a stir. He even visited the king, King James II, who
mm,
had his portrait painted, a full length portrait. And so we can see what he looks like. From that time, an interest in Chinese things lasted for nearly 100 years in England. So we started importing silk, tea. People were drinking Chinese tea in London. You know, not Indian tea, the red tea we associate with England, but this is green tea. We were drinking green tea in the 1700s. Um, and people were redesigning their gardens in Chinese style. There were Chinese houses. Even the king and the Prince of Wales, who is the son of the king, they
mhm,
designed their houses in Chinese style. So Chinese was a real, a kind of, what should I call it? Uh, it was um, it was more than just a phase. It really captured the public's imagination. So for the Freemasons to create a Chinese ritual, but without using Chinese words, I don't think that's so unusual.
mm. So when you talk about immortality and it coming from
Yes,
ancient Chinese text, any
yes,
idea which text mention
yes,
immortality?
yes. So um, I so what my feeling is that the Chinese Mandarin, his name is Xiong Fuzhong, he taught people, a professor at Oxford University where he was staying. This professor was familiar with all the leading people, including the king. You know, he had it was ability for the professor to visit the king, which is unusual, and he met people like Boyle and Newton and people like this, and he he either left a document, and there is a picture of them holding a document in a painting of this professor, and the scroll he's holding has Chinese words on it, Chinese characters. But the thing is, the professor was the professor of Hebrew. They weren't teaching Chinese at Oxford University. So why is he holding a Chinese scroll? Anyway, um,
Right.
so yes, the document that they may have used is called "The Secret of the Golden Flower."
I was hoping you were gonna say that. I
Yep.
read it not too long ago, well,
Yep.
the English translation, and it's really, really good. I also read the one that I read had commentary by Carl Jung,
Yes.
and it was really fascinating. I'm sorry, go on.
Yes. No, no, but so I checked that the book first became available in the 1600s in China, and before that it had been written down as a scroll. So the thing to understand is there are two types of Taoism in China. There is a philosophical type called Yi Guan Dao, which was the one I joined, and then there's another one called Jiao Dao, or Dao Jiao, which is a more religious type, and they are into these mystical ceremonies using tons of incense. And the Secret of the Golden Flower is based on that religious type.
For sure. Well, we only have about a minute left. Is there anything that I know I wanna just keep going. Is there
Yeah,
anything
yeah.
that you wanna leave with the audience before we go?
So, yes, so I would like people to reevaluate Freemasonry and not think it is a society of old men with secrets that they don't want to teach anybody, but they've probably forgotten anyway. Um, in my books, if I can put a plug in, I have a set of 5 books, which one for each degree, which looks in great detail at all the connections. The books are called Spiritual Freemasonry. Each one has a different title, but the set is Spiritual Freemasonry. And if you read that, then you will suddenly realize that Freemasonry is a spiritual practice to show people how the spirit is immortal and we don't have to fear death.
Wow. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Chris Earnshaw. I truly enjoyed this conversation. I had been looking forward to it. And
You're
thank you,
welcome.
everyone. Have a great one.
My pleasure. Peace.